In my situation, I would have simply been repressed, and I would have been able to just go on in reality, and nobody would have even known.
There is a difference between not being able to live out your desires or just saying no to whatever fantasy has popped across one's head and being repressed. We see in other videos that Unicole Unicron has said that violence doesn't come easy to her. She said that she bullied people into sex, and, that would make a person a serial rapist, right? I have been told by Ghosty and Aaron in particular that I need to learn how to tolerate child molesters and other sexual predators. And I think that is actually why things have flipped over, right? In how I was treated via Unicole and most Unicult members. And if you watch this video, you see two sorts of aberrations in particular in the body language. You see the idea that no, she wasn't abused, and two, the idea that living out these ideas seems like it was more than a thought experiment, right? And particularly you see in some other videos this person's talking about the objects that they masturbate with and even breaking them and whatever, that's whatever. And octopus, cartoon octopus porn. I guess there's everything nowadays. And, all that violent stuff and not wanting to fetish shame people. I mean, if people have desires or whatever and they just pass their minds, but we're gonna see here in a minute why this is more than just some personal thing that I am addressing here. I'm not addressing, how I was personally treated by Unicole and those following suit.
When I was younger, I had a charge of energy around the idea of sexuality in kids.
And that is the difference right here, why gays against groomers and those who aren't gay are drawing the difference. Kids don't have sexuality. I mean, nature naturally gives you that when you hit puberty, but people should not be engaging the so-called sexuality or gender identity of pre-adolescence. That's a clear thing right there.
And I was so afraid of it, right? And I knew there was something there, but I didn't want to look at it. I didn't know what it was. I secretly was afraid, like, what if I'm a pedophile? Like, I don't want to know that. I don't know how I would deal with that.
Because the philia there is just the attraction. And the homosexuality or the LGBT in general, yeah, it's not the same thing. But we should look at why most of it and most of the rape is from that faction, even though they are so vastly outnumbered in the general society.
A strong charge of energy. That's the best way I can describe it. When I felt into the energy of sexuality and children.
Now, we do notice that when Unicole talks about triggering people in a way that perhaps would hurt them, or just excuse me for beating my husband or whatever, there is this charge associated with it. So this isn't just something being experimented with here. This is, part of this person's identity. Maybe it's not their main thing, but the idea that somebody would at all, and this is obviously
eventually I finally allowed myself to explore what it was that was there,
and exploring it. If you think about doing something bad, you just kind of put it off to the side and put something else in its place, right? You don't
I realized in allowing myself to have these fantasies is that I was able to see what they actually were. And in the fantasies, I was actually a child, and I was actually being abused by an older person.
And look at that. This regardless of what was actually the past, this is a potential. This is a potential right for the future. And there's this focus in imitating being a kid. And she, last year, before one of the retreats, was pretending that she was underage. So as a high schooler, instead of a 34-year-old woman, she was, that was her idea.
Right, so that was the energy, and I realized that I was just reliving my childhood trauma in this way,
and when she talks about sexual trauma, I mean, people have experiences that kind of move them per se, like in the Freudian sense, but not in the sense of, what one would typically consider abuse. Certainly not something. But we do find elsewhere that originally the story was that she had memories when she was little that no one was there. And she looks back at that and says, oh, maybe I was neglected. And it's like, sometimes the parents go off for more than a few minutes. It doesn't mean a kid's neglected.
I was processing it in this way because I'm a victim of childhood sexual abuse. So because I didn't have the tools to deal with that, and because I didn't have even the understanding or the affirmation.
Well, somebody who actually was, kids aren't given that independent morality. They're not given that full ability to choose with what they're presented with yet. But the idea that there's not the tools until you reach this certain, until you're middle-aged is not quite the same thing. Now, somebody had told me, and there's actually the picture of the person, that when they went to one of the Unicult events, that this person that they were talking about, they came back fantasizing about children and animals. And this video also mentions animals. And you see in some other posts, this person's asking the question, can dogs consent? Can dolphins consent?
Information that had happened to me when I was a kid, I built up this charge of energy inside of me, and I didn't know what to do with it, and I didn't know how to process it. Luckily, I've been on this spiritual healing journey.
And even if this was just a role play thing, and encouraging others towards that role play of thinking what it would be like to be a sexual predator, this sort of stuff helps produce the behavior. And I know some people, and pretty much one of the most common things with people who have actually been sexually abused is that there's a moment where they physically enjoyed it, or they wanted to see what was going on, or whatever. That's not something to blame them for, and that is not the same thing as...
I couldn't repress it anymore, and I allowed myself to explore what it was in the safety of my mind, and I found out that it was actually from the perspective of being a child and having that experience. So,
but when she talks about this gender identity thing, which I'm told by people in LA that when it's off camera, this person doesn't require all this non-physical pronoun stuff. Because, biologically, there's only two genders. And, a lot of people have been fed all these ideas like, oh, if you're good at this, or you're not good at that, you're gay, or whatever. And that, it goes across the board, and some people take that seriously and make it part of their lifestyle. And that's one of the origins of this. But you see the sociopathic connection here, and what's going on. And she uses the same wording in regards to the child molesting fantasies as she uses in regards to, this gender identity thing that she forces on everybody else. Now, fine, roleplay, but it goes beyond roleplay. And I'm just pointing out here that I sincerely think that this and some of the other media indicates a danger in this regard with Unicole and at least some of her followers. I'm not blaming anybody else in particular in regards to that, but I'm just relating what I have been told and what I've encountered. And if it was just that I had been told, stay on, okay, here's your money back, we don't, I guess we can't have somebody like you in the group, it's like, I would have let that go. But I found out all sorts of stuff in relation to this, and honestly, ask everywhere where this person has lived. There's always been something suspicious. She talks about the femme fatale thing, and she knows via her studies of people like Jim Jones and Charles Manson how a person can be manipulated sexually, either by programming of attachment or detachment or other methods. And I am not too critical about the fact that, okay, there was some, well, if that's what they're going to bust her for, there is a video following the Texas retreat where she admits having a three-way with a couple of her followers. In Texas, it's a statutory rape charge up to 10 years apiece for a church leader or other religious official, the secretary, whatever, pretty much anything except the janitor, right, having sex with any of the congregation members, even if the person is older. That's actually law in Texas. So we know beyond doubt that this person is a sex offender. But perhaps other people can indicate some things in here. And, I mean, certainly the community around her in Georgia might not be too sympathetic with even the idea of her cheating on her husband. I mean, she's no longer married. The guy left the country. Good for him, right? But on the way home from work and complaining publicly, it's like, why doesn't my husband cheat on me? Let me cheat on him, and all that stuff. And talking about, how she's, she needs multiple bedrooms. She needs multiple bedrooms in that, basically a mansion, right? So that her lovers who don't want to sleep together can sleep, in separate rooms or something, right? It's like, and she's posted elsewhere about, oh, it's just not feasible for me to have sex with all of you. So when people say pansexual, they mean some stuff otherwise. They don't just mean consensual, everything adult. They mean they're open for what comes across. And yeah, it's one thing to have a desire or to like what occurred, but it's another thing, your own beliefs and actions regarding something. This is not a video about homophobia. It's not a video about whatever. I honestly, if I was in person with any of these people, I would want physical distance between me and them. And I'm not backing down about my position that the government should institute the death penalty for those sorts of A-class felonies.